When people ask me about the business book that had the biggest impact on my life, I don't say The 4-Hour Work Week or Rich Dad Poor Dad. Don't get me wrong, those are both fantastic titles. But the book with the biggest impact on my life is the simple and somewhat pretentiously titled How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis, originally published in 2006. In this video, I'm gonna share the biggest takeaways from this book and the direct impact these lessons from the book had in my own business life. Whether you're just starting a side hustle of your own or you run a business already, I think there are valuable things that you can take away from this book too. So let's do this. As background, Felix Dennis was a British publishing giant valued at more than $750 million according to a Wall Street Journal report. Dennis is credited with pioneering the release of hobbyist magazines about personal computers and released titles like Personal Computer World and Mac User. Dennis expanded his publishing empire over the years into news magazines like The Week and the title every male in high school read at some point growing up, Maxim magazine. Over the years, I've read dozens of entrepreneur biographies, but I always resonated the most with Felix Dennis's journey more than anybody else. Dennis started his life as a broke artist, trying to make it as a blues singer, but ultimately Dennis would face the harsh realization from none other than John Lennon himself that being a singer just wasn't ever gonna pay the bills for him and pan out. He just didn't have it. When I first came across this book in an airport bookstore, to say that I resonated with this story personally would be a major understatement. At the time, I'd recently left a band I spent years working on and ultimately moved to Los Angeles to pursue from the Midwest. That's how serious I was about it. But after a few years of working with producers, playing gigs, promoting, I faced the realization that if I continued doing the same thing, I could quickly reach 30 years old plus and have literally nothing to show for it aside from some really good stories to tell people. I saw a future where I could never afford to buy a house, much less even pay my monthly student loan payments or afford an apartment by myself. It sucked. Unfortunately for my friends who remained in the band after I left, this is exactly what happened to them. After I left the band, they continued moving ahead for a couple of years. They were signed by a major label and then dropped within a year. At this point, the band basically just lost all their momentum. This left my former bandmates in the exact situation that I had feared about myself just a couple of years earlier. And for me, Felix's story offered some hope that I could reinvent myself and I could build something that I was passionate about after leaving the world of music. If I only applied my energy into building that business, I could eventually build something awesome. Of course, just because I learned that it was possible to build a business from nothing, that doesn't mean I wouldn't still flounder around for years after that point trying to figure out what business is actually going to work for me. It took literally years before I could even pay off my student loan debt, much less buy a house. Years afterwards, I continued to barely scrape by, renting out rooms in other people's houses and working a job just to keep most of my minimum payments paid on my credit cards. Felix's younger years are not short of financial hardship either. Dennis was raised by a single mother who never earned much money. Dennis recounts times shimmying down fire escapes to get away from a landlord, demanding a rent check, and losing girlfriends because he didn't have the funds to go partying with friends. Again, these are just stories and examples that I could really relate with at the time that I found the book. No matter, Felix would eventually, of course, figure out how to make money. He got his first taste of success after selling a limited edition magazine and biography about Bruce Lee shortly after his unexpected death. Dennis would use this first success as a springboard to launch dozens of other magazine titles over the following decades. Now, this lesson described by Dennis as weaving an additional basket. What Felix means by this is that in the early days, you need to focus all your effort and energy into building one business, I learned. Even if that business doesn't end up becoming the main thing that you do in the future, you gotta start somewhere. Now, after you successfully build that first basket or a business, whatever you wanna call it, you don't wanna rest on your laurels and stop innovating. Instead, once you get one basket made, it's time to go look for another revenue source and create a second basket in case the first one disappears due to changes in the industry, that you just can't anticipate. After all, not every profitable business is meant to last forever. Just ask Kodak. Rolling small successes into new ventures is something I've tried to model in my own life based on the lessons in the book. For example, I own a food business website called foodtruckempire.com. After building this website into a six-figure annual business, instead of spending the money on myself, buying a new car or whatever, I used the money to purchase a second website called Mobile Cuisine. Now, this second website basically doubled my monthly cash flow within about a year and a half of operating it. And not only does this bring in a whole new source of income, but it also helps spread out my business risk a little bit since I'm not relying on one website to make all of my money. Today, I'm able to reinvest this additional cash flow from these two baskets that I created into other cash producing assets. For right now, I'm spending it on dividend paying stocks and editing for this YouTube channel that you're watching right now. My hope, of course, is that these investments are eventually going to be able to make me even more money through YouTube, advertising checks, and then through dividend stock payments. I'm just trying to weave more baskets by doing this. Another lesson Felix stresses in this book is the importance of owning the company. In fact, Felix wrote an entire chapter on the subject called,
wait for it,
ownership, ownership, ownership. According to Felix, ownership isn't the only thing, it's everything when it comes to getting rich. He describes in his book how he doesn't mind paying out big bonuses to employees, but he will never give away even a percentage of ownership in his company if he can help it. The reason for this is that when it comes time to sell your company, you will miss out on this major windfall by giving away the company to other people, especially employees. Felix even goes as far as to say that he wouldn't give his brother or mother any shares if he could help it. While this might all sound harsh, if your goal is to get rich, like Dennis suggests you try to do, fighting for any percentage of ownership you can get is what you've got to do. I've applied this advice in my own business as well. Both my websites and this channel, for example, are 100% owned by me. I'm occasionally asked to join joint ventures and, with other founders. While I find some of these opportunities appealing from time to time, it's just hard to justify taking the time away from my own business to go work on something else. And anytime you add owners to a business, it complicates the decision making. You can't move as fast. There are also the considerations of some owners putting in more effort than others, or not spending and investing as much money as others, but still sharing equally in the profits. It's tough. While I think it could be really fun to work side by side with somebody, I've just never come across anyone else that's determined enough to run a business that isn't already running their own business and got their own stuff going on. If you do get a partner, I think you want someone who is going to go all in with the idea. This is much easier said than done based on my own set of experiences.
but hey, I know it does work out for some people.
Even though my business is way smaller than Dennis Publishing, I am happy that I've followed this guidance in this area of my life as well. I'm not accountable to anyone, and I can make fast decisions on hiring, firing, what I want to spend money on, and the future direction of the business without running it by anyone first. It feels pretty cool. Finally, one last lesson that I've taken away from this book, and it's something that I'm hoping to double down on in the next 12 months and go even bigger on. In How to Get Rich, Dennis stresses the importance of hiring smart people in the book for your businesses. Smart people can, of course, solve problems for you and ultimately make you a lot of money. Dennis stresses the importance of identifying talented people, loading up their schedules with challenging projects, and promoting them as quickly as possible. This took me a while to take action on this advice for a couple of reasons. First, when I started out building my websites on the side, I didn't have really any money at all to hire anyone. I did almost everything myself. As a result, my progress, my business progress, it was really slow. If I wasn't working directly on something, nothing was moving forward, nothing was getting done. Like most first-time owners, I struggled to pay someone when I finally started to make a little money for work that I knew that I could do myself for free. And it wasn't really until I started hiring out writers, especially full-time ones for my blog, that traffic started to accelerate. And here's why. Instead of being able to write 2 blog posts per week on my own, I was suddenly able to publish 10 or more posts on my website. Obviously, this transformed the amount of work that I could get done over the course of a month. And as a result, traffic to my website and then revenue increased much faster than ever before. that was kind of the light bulb moment for me that like, wow, this hiring thing, there's something to it. The older I get, the more I learn this is so valuable. I view this advice as super important. You know, when I first started hiring, I was worried a lot about the price tag, but now I'm becoming more concerned about hiring people that are super talented, that can solve problems for me, and frankly, don't require much hand-holding. You can kind of send them down a path and they're gonna forge their own trail. If you've never hired someone before, I recommend starting with a website like Fiverr where you can hire out different little projects. This is the approach I used, and after a while, you'll start to recognize time-consuming work that you can hire off to other employees, whether they're part-time, contractors, or full-time. So there you have it. These are the biggest life-changing lessons I've taken away from the book, How to Get Rich. If you haven't read this book yet, I'd recommend doing so. Felix's unique wit alone, I think, is worth the read. He's got so many stories connected to musicians that he covered in the music industry over the decades, and some really funny stories about his love life and women and spending sprees that I won't get into here. This is also the only book I think I've ever read more than once and continue to come back every once in a while, reread year after year, and I pick up little different nuggets from it. So let me know, have you read this book? Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. If you click on the description link, I've also linked up to some of my favorite interviews with Felix Dennis if you want to go on a deep dive into the subject of getting rich. Subscribe to this channel below for more videos just like this about building a profitable business, and I'll see you soon.